Up, episode 12. Back again after I think almost like 2 months now. And today, to break that streak, not uploading for 2 months, we have Prathama Raghavan. She's a mental health therapist. She works in multiple different countries like India and Nepal and Myanmar. She actually got her PhD in France. She can actually speak fluent French, which I found really cool because I'm taking French and I don't really like it. But yeah, Prathama, welcome to Bottom Up.
Thank you, Manav.
I
Yeah,
mean,
pleasure to be here.
obviously, I started off by saying that you're a therapist because that's mainly what you do. And in the modern generation, mental health is almost seen as the same priority as physical health.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, a lot of young people, including myself, want to get into the mental health sector and become therapists, a psychiatrist, a counselor, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like sometimes it's just terms that we throw around, like, oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be this, I want to be that. We don't actually know what it means to work in that kind of sector. So, like, as a therapist, like, what is therapy, like, in terms of mental health?
Oh, yeah, that's not an easy question to answer. I mean, in the sense, in a way that it makes sense for everyone, I guess. But to me, mental health therapy is a process that you embark on, right? Like, with somebody comes to consult with me because they want to maybe feel better in their lives somehow. And for me, it's a process of finding and nurturing our own ways of being that may or may not always be in alignment with what the world demands out of us, right? Like, and often it's that tension that causes distress. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like, yes, I like at our age, like I said, we all want to be therapists, but I mean, is it like, should we all aspire to do it? Like, would you, like, is some young person that, oh, I want to be a therapist, like, would you encourage it? What would you tell them in terms of this is like the risk involved, this is the not so good side? Because for someone going into like any sector, they should know the pros and cons just so they know what they're fully getting into, right? Like, what are some drawbacks of therapy? Like, what are some of the hard things?
I mean, for me, or according to me, the hardest thing is how closely you see um, how the injustices of the world affect people, right? And the distress that it causes in individual people's lives, the inequalities of the world, the discriminations that happen, um, and I think sometimes that can lead to feeling quite helpless in the face of the larger problems of the world. For example, if you're thinking gender equality, or like I work a lot with people who experience disabilities, and then you feel the world is so discriminating of people who experience disabilities, or does not, is not respectful of so many differences. I think you see that very closely, and that can be, yeah, I mean, you can't ignore the inequalities of the world, I feel, if you're a therapist. And that can be something sometimes hard to hold on to all the time, right? Like, yeah,
Like, keep it in, keep it calm, because
yeah.
I mean, there are two things that I thought of when you were saying this. Was one, I feel like me and you, even though I'm only 15, we're both working for the same thing, which is kind of disability injustice. Which is
Hmm.
one of the reasons why I'm so vocal about me working out, is because I want to show people that anything is really possible for any of us, right?
Yeah.
For people with or without disability, there's always a limit, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try and get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the second thing is that it's hard to keep it in, right? And I think this is the one thing we don't realize is a therapist also has a brain with feelings, and it's not just someone that you can say all your things to and they'll just hold it in, right? Like they also have
Yeah.
to process what you're going through. So
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever seen in like your career where like people come up to you and they're like, "Oh, why are you crying? You're a therapist. You're supposed to solve this. You're not supposed to,
Yeah.
suffer from this, right?" I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it's almost like a doctor going into surgery. Like
Mm,
it
mm.
happens to all of us, but I think mental health is so much more different because although a doctor going into surgery is the same probability of any other person going into surgery.
Yeah.
From an outside view, I feel like a therapist is much more likely to experience mental health issues,
Mm.
especially in later years,
Mm-hmm.
because of the distress they feel. Like,
Yeah.
what's your opinion on this?
Interesting that you say that. I'm actually curious why or how you came to that understanding. You'll tell me. I think, I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking that in a in one of my conversations, maybe a couple of weeks ago, I was um, I was crying in the therapy session because something that the person who was telling me was very moving, and it was about like real serious injustices in the world, right? Like they were telling me this story, and I can't help but be moved by that. And at the end of that session, they said, "Thank you for crying with me." And usually, I might have tears in my eyes. Many times it happens to me in a conversation, but this time they were like, tears flowing. It
Yeah.
was a lot. Um, and I'm grateful that in some moments that can happen, and it is still experienced as sharing a moment, and it doesn't become like I'm centering my distress in that moment, right? Like that is what should not happen. So like that. And I think, I mean, I have a therapist, I have clinical supervisors with whom I can talk about if I have um, something difficult that I'm holding. I mean, I think we seem like we are individual practitioners, but there is a community of people supporting us to do the work that we do too. Like I have other therapists that I talk about, and all this we do this while holding the confidentiality of the people that we are talking about. But sometimes we need support from other people in order to continue doing the work we are doing, right? Like, and I don't take that lightly. I put in place lots of practices in order for me to be able to continue doing the work that I'm doing. Yeah.
I feel like that's pretty awesome that you guys have like a group of people that you can rely on, yet you still preserve the confidentiality of
Yeah.
the people you talk to, right? I mean, but another thing I was thinking was, I mean, what you said that like I do my own things to keep my health in check. I have a group of people, but I also do things like. Could you elaborate, like what the doing things mean?
I think everyone has their own practices. One of the things that I think I do that is important to me is I also talk to a therapist. I like having that space, to talk about whatever is happening in my own life, right? Like, or things that I may be worried about in my own life. Or one is that practice, and then just practices of keeping myself sort of grounded and well regulated. Like, I I I try to have. I mean, sleep is really important to me, and it's not easy to come. Like sometimes it's hard for me to sleep, so I have a sleep before sleep routine, for example, that I follow. I usually listen to some sort of guided meditation thing. I read a little bit. I'm quiet before sleep for at least an hour, like, this kind of thing, so that I can sleep well. Like, that's one example. I love gardening, it's one of my practices to take care of myself. I love growing plants, like, and watching them grow and growing vegetables and whatever little. Okay, I don't have a vegetable garden or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
I grow a few things. Um, I think all this helps me. I read a lot of other people who have done this kind of work or people who are doing social justice work, and I find solidarity in the kind of work that they do. Yeah, what else? I do a little bit of, I mean, I do yoga. I go to a meditation class. I think all of these things, I need them in order to have,
A balance.
yeah, in order to feel balanced, feel some kind of harmony in my life. Like, yeah,
Because that's another misconception that we find in Nepal is that being sad is a bad thing, right? But I
yeah,
think the right word is not to keep you happy. It's more to have a balance of those kind of emotions because
yeah,
I think the problem happens when you're either too happy or too sad, right? Like you don't get the whole experience, right? Like is
yeah.
that what therapy works to do? It doesn't. It's not working towards getting rid of sadness. It's working towards balancing it, right?
And I think it's also, um, in some ways, understanding what the sadness is telling us about what's important to us, right? Like, because if we are feeling upset about something, that tells us something about what we think about the world or what we feel about the world. So I think it's also paying attention to that. Yeah.
And then another thing that you were mentioning is meditation, right? Which I find
Mm.
really interesting because a lot of people swear by meditation. Some people think it's some gimmick that you're just sitting down and breathing. But as
Mm.
a therapist and you being in the whole mental health and meditation is supposed to help cleanse your mind and make you free of any emotion, right? That's the main goal, right?
Yeah.
What's your opinion on not therapy, meditation?
So the kind of meditation that I do, I mean, the class I go to, I'm learning, right? Like is basically it's an observation of what is happening. It's like learning to observe without judging your emotions or your thoughts, right? And you let it pass, and then and also it's shifting between looking inward and looking outward. So you're looking at your thoughts, thinking about your or watching your thoughts, and then you're watching the outside environment and the sounds and the sensory experience of the outside environment, and that shift, doing that, it's just like a gymnastics of the mind. It's learning to stop the judgment, learning to watch the thoughts go by, and then learning to switch between inner and outer. I mean, I think it's a practice of not, maybe, of learning not to spiral in them, maybe. I don't know if the people who teach me would agree with this definition, but it feels like that to me. It's my experience.
That you're
Yeah.
just watching it go by and you're not judging, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think, like, hearing you say this, I realize that I think a lot of the negative emotions we have as humans, the core reason for having those feelings is judgment. Would you agree with that?
Is us judging ourselves, you mean? Or the
Or
world
us
judging us? Or,
judging, like, just
yeah.
judging in general,
Yeah.
right? Like, it causes
Yeah.
negativity in different sadness or anger, but I think the root moment is judgment, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, if we didn't judge the thing that happened and when we meditate we just let them go by, right, without
Yeah.
judging,
Yeah.
then we feel so much more free.
Yeah.
And once again, happy is not the right word, but I think free is, like, you're just
Yeah.
yourself, you're free.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you, like, what's your opinion on judgment? Do you think, like, because of the cases you witness, right, no matter how injustice they are, right, you are judging them at some point? Doesn't make it like, oh, you don't have a right to be sad because you're just judging it, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, do you think judgment is the root cause of, like, the negative imbalances that we have?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think the judgment of each other, and the judgment of ourselves, and this binary of good or bad or happy or sad, right? Like, and all the other binaries, successful, not successful, smart, not smart, whatever. Like, most of the judgment happens in binaries, right? And binaries are never, nothing actually exists in binaries,
What do you mean by
like
binary?
this, just two things, good and bad.
Happy,
Yeah,
sad, good or
happy,
bad.
sad, good or bad,
Okay.
like that. There's so much more, there is so much nuance between all that, right? But judgment usually does the binary. It's either black or white.
I see.
Like, so, and I feel that's the hard part. It's that we are not seeing it in all its
Glory.
nuance, and whether it's our own experience or each other's experience, perhaps. I don't know. Yeah. I'd never thought about it before, actually. So,
Yeah,
mm,
it's interesting that like it's either like happy, sad, good or bad, but like, it's what you're saying is like the truth is not about yes or no. It's the everything in between, So you get the whole thing. To me, it almost sounds like one of those assignments where you had to weigh up the pros and cons, and you had to like determine whether you agree or disagree with it, right?
yeah.
I mean, another thing is like opinions. Opinions can piss a lot of people off, but we all think about things in a different way, right? Because of this whole pros and cons, yes or no kind of thing, right? Do you like at what point should we like not care about like what other people think? Like 'cause that is another root cause of judging, right? Because you're judging other people on their opinion, right?
Mm.
Like, you think opinions also have to do with mental health? Like in mental health, what I'm trying to get at here is what is the root cause of like mental health issues? Like at the end of the day, there's got to be something in common between all cases.
I actually don't know if there is. I mean, in the sense that in order to be able to find like one thing in common, I would have to simplify it a lot. And I don't want to do that, like, because I feel that it's like if each person's life is so complicated, right? Like, complicated in the sense, not complicated, complex. I mean, I think the metaphor of the night sky is is what I think of when I think of someone's life, and the stars as their experiences. It's so, like, diverse and so detailed, and so that we can't really come to a common, like, cause necessarily. But I think in general, I mean, I think the thing that causes distress perhaps is that in some way or the other they are not able to live their life in the way that they would like to, either because there is no access to some things in order to be able to live their life the way they would like to, or because people think that they have to do it in a particular way and that doesn't fit with how they want to do it, right? Like, um yeah. So for me, the process of therapy is actually to find your own way of being, in a way that, and people who support your way of being, and to be able to nurture that, you know yeah. And that might make you more resilient to those who may not agree with how you live your life,
Mm.
right? Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, comes back to whole like the other people judging you and the opinion, but the real blockade is you not being able to live your life in the way that you want.
Mm.
And sometimes it's not a flat out yes or no. Like just like it's not black and white. Like just move out your house or find new friends. It's so like
Yeah.
you can think of it like that. Like I'm a very logical person. I'm really like you give me like a word problem and I'll solve it, right? Because
Yeah.
I'll solve it in a very binary type of way, right?
Yeah.
And then, so when people like come on to me with problems, right? Sometimes I think to myself, well, why don't you just, tell them how you feel, or just move out, or just, you know, find a new group of friends. But it's so much harder than that. Like, cause here, this is how I would like to explain it: is that yes, you can say all those things, and yes, logically, all of them should work. But before you say it, you should think, can I do this? Like, whenever I say, oh, just find a new group of friends, right? I'm thinking, how hard would it be to find a new group of friends? Because you're putting yourself out there, leaving what you already have to get something even better that you don't even know is out there, right?
Mm.
Or with family, just tell them how you feel, right? That could make it worse or better. They could kick you at the house. They could give you cold shoulders. Your relationship might not be the same anymore, right? Like, yes, on paper, everything seems to work. But reality, like you said, is not binary. It's not yes or no. It's not like computers that deal with ones and zeros, right? It's
Yeah.
so much more complex than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, another thing I wanted to get onto was, as a therapist, you also worked in Myanmar, right? With a lot of refugees, the Rohingya refugees. How was that experience?
Um. So Myanmar is home to the Rohingyas, right?
Yeah.
They are from Myanmar, and there is like a big refugee community of the Rohingyas in Bangladesh because they cross the river to come to Bangladesh whenever there's violence in Myanmar. I've worked both in Myanmar and in Bangladesh, and I mean that's. I think it's one of the experiences that really made me think about the extent of injustices in the world that are perpetuated by humans on other humans, right? Like, um, yeah, it's and it's difficult. I mean, it's difficult to wrap your mind around something like that. Like, you don't understand why that would. I don't understand why there would be any reason for that kind of violence. But this thing of borders and minorities and origins of people, are you originally from here or not, these kinds of questions which seem to me so irrelevant, like in any part of the world.
Circumstance, yeah.
Hmm? Yeah.
Any circumstance.
Yeah. I think it revolves around all those questions, yeah. But yeah, it's hard. But I always think it's not harder than for the Rohingyas, right? For me,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm the witness somehow.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like, you're just watching it. You're not actually.
yeah.
I think the one thing I found really interesting when learning about this was the fact that it was like to their own people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for example, like, maybe I haven't got the full picture here, but I feel like with the whole racism thing, like, it's doesn't mean it's right. That's not what I'm saying, but it's because they're different colors that they're discriminated, right? Um, it's with the whole LGBTQ thing. It's because they like the same sex, or they identify as something else, so they're discriminated against because they're not like these people. With disabilities, it's you're handicapped. You can't do certain things, so you shouldn't be with us because you're gonna drag us down, kind of thing, right? What was the justification for discriminating against the Rohingya people? Because it's the same people, same country. Like, where? Because I feel like working on a case like this, you have to try and see the other side as well. What was there any justification? Like, did they come as refugees, or like?
I mean, the from the perspective of the Myanmar, um, like whoever people who were doing the violence, right? Like from their perspective, it's their I don't know if it's a justification in any way, but their understanding is that they are not from um, that they are not originally from Myanmar.
Okay.
That is what they say. But the Rohingya people have lived there for generations, you know, they are from there. But because it's a border community, they many border communities all over are, you know, like borders are so random, right? Like
Yeah,
even between Nepal and India, for example, the southern border, same communities live on both sides of the border, right? Like,
yeah. Exactly.
and but there are some of them who are Nepali nationals and some of them are Indian nationals, like, and then so much of the border in South Asia is like that. It's just like random lines drawn across
The
whatever.
land.
Yeah, and with so much that caused so much violence
Yeah.
between communities and stuff, you know. So I think it's that, like, I mean, I think that part of it, thinking, oh, they are not originally from here, but so what, is also what I think, you know, like even if you
Mm.
think that,
Like
right, like,
even like,
yeah,
I feel like they've been living there for generations. Like, I still don't get it. Like,
yeah,
how is that justification for them not being from Myanmar? They've been there for generations. You know.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
like exactly. I feel like I don't know. This is all very controversial, and I'd rather not get into it fully.
yeah.
Otherwise, people might be coming after us. But one last question on this topic was the
Mm.
people from Myanmar or the Rohingya refugees themselves, their lifestyle, their way of thought, their culture must be so different to yours, right? And the way you believe and think cannot be the same as the way they believe and think.
Mhm.
So, how do you help them by not pushing your views on them? Like, letting them be who they are, their culture, but still helping them. Because I feel like if I was in that situation, I would be like, oh, this is what I believe, like injustice and all that. You're in the right, blah, 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 right? Like,
Yeah,
democracy, I don't know. Democracy, But,
yeah.
like,
Mm.
obviously, like, I feel like that's the wrong way of going about it because then you're taking away from their culture, their heritage. We still want to help them.
Mm. Mm.
And how did you manage that?
Um, I mean, I think that's true in some way or the other. It's true of any two people having that conversation, right? Like, I could potentially impose my ideas on someone else who's consulting with me, whose culture supposedly is quite similar to mine too, right? Like, so in some ways I look at it like that, like, meaning, I think as therapists we need to be, or as mental health workers or as social justice workers or development workers or whatever, really aware of the fact that we have some power in the interaction, right? That people think of us as experts somehow, that we are supposed to know, and sometimes they look for us to give them also the answers, or the things that we say will be perceived as said with a lot of legitimate authority, right? And so we have to be careful of how we use that power. You know, that power is there as a therapist or as a doctor, for example, as a mental health professional. I do have power in that relationship, and I must be careful about how I use that influence, you know. And for me, the understanding is that people all have their own ways of responding and resisting the problems that people have in their lives, and my job is to make that more visible. Yeah. So the questions I ask and the conversations I have will be to be a witness to the ways in which you resist and the ways in which you live your life, you know. Yeah, irrespective of my opinion about it, right? Like, yeah,
Like, it's almost like coaching, like you're not giving them the answer, but you're probing them to find their own answer, right? Because
yeah,
that's the
mm,
best way of letting them do it the way they think they should, right?
yeah, yeah.
Do you think that's better? Because, like, if they come to that conclusion on their own through your probing question, the blame of you giving them the wrong ideas will be less, right?
Yeah, I mean, both, right? Like, I think it's sometimes we call it co-researching. If there's a problem and you want to figure out how to navigate that problem, then as therapist and person who's consulting with the therapist, you are co-researching that problem, right? It's work done together. So definitely, I don't have to feel like I have to come up with all the answers. um, and yeah, and risk giving answers that are probably harmful,
Yeah.
or not useful. Harmful at worst, not useful at best, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's better to figure out things together than. So the skill is actually, I mean, the skill that we learn is actually of questions, asking questions, of researching together, of loitering in the situation till you find some pathway out. Yeah,
I mean, yeah, that makes sense, right?
yeah.
But, like, another thing you were talking about a few minutes ago was you were saying professionals with quotation marks.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
I mean, obviously, I spent many years training to be a therapist, and I continue to do trainings and, to learn different ways of approaching conversations and work with people. But I think that doesn't mean that I know um, how people can have good mental health. Also, I don't know what that means either.
Mm.
But it doesn't mean that I have things that I can tell people to do and they will be able to feel better in their lives, right?
Solve
Like,
all your problems.
yeah, that is not the kind of expertise that this is. I know what my inner life looks like and how to nurture my ways of being, but I don't know how everyone else's inner life looks like. I need to ask them to understand that, right? So even if I talk to many, many, many people, it still doesn't mean, it means I know how to ask questions to know someone's inner life better
Yeah.
than maybe someone else who has not spent so many hours practicing that, right?
Hmm.
But that is the skill. It's not to knowing. Sometimes people ask me, can you see my face and tell me my personality or tell me about me? Can you face read, right? And I'm like, I can not face read at all. I'm actually really bad at understanding understanding people with little information, because I'm so used to understanding people with a lot of information. I feel like you don't know anything about people by just looking at them, that you need to have many conversations to be able to understand what people's inner lives are like. It's very hard to discern, actually.
And
So,
still,
yeah,
like, through all of that,
yeah,
you still can't voice your opinion on their life because
yeah,
you can't get the full story in just
ever, yeah,
1 hour sessions,
yeah,
like a week.
yeah,
You'll never get the full story,
yeah,
like, ever, right?
yeah, yeah,
And there's something I wanted to speak on was, like, going back to the whole opinions thing, right? It's like you don't know what I'm going through, so you can't voice your opinion on what I should do, right?
yeah.
And I don't know what you're going through, doesn't mean I should tell you what's right for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a kid in an industry like this, and as a kid going to the gym and being surrounded by adults, right? A lot of the times I get their opinions are voiced on me, and I get pressured to do it because I'm young and I should listen to people older than me, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And what I realized is I just have to, like, they also have to realize that they don't see the full picture.
Yeah.
Like with the gym, for example, right? They don't know how much it means to me. They don't know the full picture. They don't. What I post on Instagram is like my once a week highlights, right? Like you don't see the
Yeah.
stretching, the hard work, the
Mm.
days I turn up when I'm come back from school and I'm exhausted, right? Like
Mm.
they don't see that. So like it's not what you see on social media is not my whole life.
Mm.
When you talk to me for when we talk for an hour, it's not my whole life. Like so like you won't be able to voice like exactly what you think I should do because you don't know what my life is. And that doesn't mean that I can do it. It's vice versa. I don't know what your life is. What you post on Instagram might be the highlights of your thing, right? Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't know. Like, so
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to say, oh, when you're biking, you should try less not to fall, or oh, when you're like when you're doing this, you should like try and like speak into the mic more, or I don't know, right? Like and like if people ask me for my opinion on something, I
Mm.
won't say I don't give opinions. I'll say what I think,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Of course.
But
Yeah.
if someone doesn't ask for your opinion, you just
Yeah.
you don't need to say it. Like
Mm.
especially on serious matters. Maybe on like a joke, you can say, "Oh, that's really funny," like casual. But like on really serious stuff, I think you people don't understand the full picture.
Yeah. 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 I mean, like I was saying, right? Like the night sky, that's why I like it. The night sky with the stars. I mean, no matter how much you think you know the stars in the sky, like it's so hard to know them all, like, or even if when it's visible. I mean, so even when people tell you some details in their lives, I think it's important to know, especially as therapists, because people can tell us a lot of things about their lives, right? Sometimes more than they've told anyone else. And but that doesn't mean you know everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, another thing that with the stargazing, a fun fact is that like apparently when you see the stars, they've already like extinguished. It's just the light reaching you.
I know.
My mind exploded that day.
I
It's
know.
crazy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I
mean,
love that too.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you're not even seeing.
The picture you're seeing
Yeah.
like a delayed picture,
Yeah.
lagging.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Mm.
I mean, I feel like when people see you, they think you're calm and collected because you're a therapist and
Yeah.
everything has gone right by the book in your life. Like whatever you wanted to happen has happened because you're a therapist and you know how you're more aware about mental health than anybody else. So
Mm.
whatever happens in your life, you should be in control of everything, right? I
Mm.
feel like that's this persona, right? But I think one of the struggles that you've gone through is you've been through a divorce, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, could you walk us through that?
Um, about what it was like, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think mm, the hard part. I mean, is is that you're dealing with everyone's perception of it, right? Is what people are thinking about, because it happens a lot, like more than we think, like, but it's also not so visible in our societies, right? Like both Indian society, Nepali society, in South Asian societies, it's not very visible, women who get divorced, so I think, and that makes it seem like you're doing this huge horrible thing, um, which puts a lot of doubt in the decision, or there is a lot of self criticism because of it, right? Like, you feel like you have failed somehow at this thing, at marriage, that you're supposed to succeed at. Right? Like, So I think that's the difficult part. I mean, it took, I think, I for a good 2 to 3 years. It was a big it was a big thing that I was carrying. I don't know yet. I don't know really what the details of what I was carrying, but it was a mix of all this, of what people may think, of whether I did this huge horrible thing, of what would life look like, because you don't have a lot of models of what life looks like also for men or women, I suppose, after a divorce, no? So all of those things. And I think like 2 3 years after, somehow I came through some sort of portal, where it just began to feel different and better and okay. It just took a lot of time. Yeah. Yeah. And it took, and I think sometimes when it takes so long and you're feeling not fully like yourself for such a long time, it can feel like it'll never feel,
The same again.
yeah, it'll never feel okay. And it's probably never the same again, because it is something big that you've experienced and you are different maybe on the other side. But it's also not, it's not that you will not ever find joy again or feel like yourself again. I mean, I feel a lot more like myself now than ever before as I get older, so
Would you
yeah.
categorize like what you happened as like depression? Would you? Cause
um,
that's another thing is like we throw like my cousin sister would bring this up all the time. Is when I would say I'm sad. Sometimes I would say I'm depressed, right?
yeah, yeah,
And people don't realize it's like depressed is not a term that you should be throwing around, right?
yeah,
That's like me saying, oh, instead of saying, oh, I have a cold, it's like me saying, oh, I have COVID. You know,
yeah,
like it's not the same thing.
right,
Yes,
right,
there's similar symptoms,
yeah,
not the
yeah,
same thing.
yeah,
It's like, oh, I have fever, oh, I have dengue. You know, it's like it's
yeah,
not the same.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
what it
I mean, I think there were times in that period that would fall under what is understood as depression. Definitely. And I probably thought that too. I mean, to be very honest, I don't think I've said this ever out loud to anyone. But one of the things I used to do was this depression assessment. I did it many times during those 3 years just to keep a check on myself, because it's so hard to be in any way rational about your own experience, right? So I would do the same. It's a list of questions where you have to answer yes or no, or there's a scale. I think it's 0 to 5 or whatever. You have to mark it on that. I would do that test just to know what was happening. Was it getting better or was it
was
getting worse or was it staying the same? I would do that test in that period every few months to keep a check on how I was feeling. But I mean, for a few months, I took a real break. Like I did stop doing I was stopped working and I stopped doing most things. But throughout that time, I was mostly doing life, right? Like I was working and cooking and cleaning and whatever, everything that life has to do. So, yeah. Mm,
life sucks
sometimes. Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then like you said, do you think these tests? Because I feel like that's a very binary way of looking at it,
It
right?
is. It is. Yeah, yeah. I'm not very fond of the
But
tests.
do you think it was an somewhat accurate representation of what was happening? Like when you
Yeah.
felt worse on some months, would the scale go higher? Like, do
Yeah.
you think it actually worked, or it was just
Yeah.
some gimmick that made you feel better inside?
I mean, I think what I don't like about some of those tests is using it um, to pathologize an experience, right? Like to, but it is, it's as if I'm asking the same list of questions over a period of time to see how my answer is different, right? that is how I use it. I used it, right? Like I used it over time with the as if it was the same list of questions, and how is it, and it would change. It's not a yeah. It's it's not a very. I wouldn't recommend it. Um, I wouldn't recommend it as some sort of like measure of depression, for example. Never. You know.
Like if the scale comes at 5, doesn't mean you're depressed.
I mean, it's supposed to be like that. There is a range.
Yeah.
If it comes at as 10, then you're mildly depressed. If it comes at 15, you're moderately depressed, whatever. That I don't, that is irrelevant, right? Like in my understanding. But the fact that today, say, and I'm not recommending it anyway, I'm just saying that I felt I needed some way of monitoring, and this was the best way that I found at that time. But I'm not recommending it necessarily to other people. Okay.
Sounds like a fitness test for your mind, right?
Yeah,
Like it's
somehow.
a fitness test,
Yeah.
but your fitness might be so broad that
Yeah.
running will not test
Yeah.
what you're good at, right? Like
Exactly.
exactly, like
Yeah.
in like fitness, health, like mental health is actually so much broader, right?
Yeah.
And in questions, the AI or computer cannot determine if you're depressed or not. Like
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think ideally we all, if I'm having a conversation about that with someone, then I would think about what are our own determinants, or what are our own ways of telling that I'm doing okay or I'm feeling not okay, right? On a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis, month-to-month basis, it's much better doing that than using a scale.
Yeah.
You know, it's much more detailed, like you're saying, right? Like, and it's much more personalized than a scale that is like the same set of 20 questions for
Yeah.
the whole human population.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah.
But like another thing, like going back to your divorce thing, right? Like, I feel like there's a lot of things to encounter here. Like with the whole like, when you get married, I feel like you don't need to really worry about dating other people or like like the worry about does anybody love me or this whole worry thing, right? Like, but when you get divorced, all of that kind of like all these expectations you build up of I don't need to worry about these kind of things anymore. It kind of becomes like I guess a bit more like oh like like you really think about these kind of things, right? Like in terms of dating and finding love or finding a partner again, right? Like, are you like, okay, I had to go at marriage, it's not for me. I'm never gonna date, not for me. I'll go on dates, but I'll never get married.
Yeah.
Like, what's the situation?
Um, I mean, I don't think I have any. I don't have like a fixed opinion about it. It keeps changing, you know.
Not binary.
Yes,
Yeah,
non-binary.
yeah.
But I think what it allowed me to discover, not having a partner, like not having an intimate partner anymore, because I got into a relationship, got married. I was quite young, you know. So it's almost like since my late teens, I was always in a relationship, not with the same person, but like long term relationships all the time. So it's almost like only after my divorce, I learned to be by myself and value other relationships in my life more, you know. So I think what has happened for me is that I really value my friendships. Yeah, and that's been actually really a beautiful thing to discover. Um, the value of adult long-term friendships. Yeah, it's a and I think that's also what is kind of hidden from us when we think that marriage is the only way to find companionship, and family in life, right? Like, and also it is, when you think about it, it's also dismissive of how people who have historically not had marriage have also found family, meaning that, like, for example, I mean queer communities, gay, lesbian
Single
people,
moms,
yeah, single moms, all
single
of
dads.
single dads, like
It's
so many types of families exist
yeah,
which are not about the partnership between a man and a woman,
yeah,
right? Like, and somehow thinking about only like the heterosexual relationship as the the only way of having companionship in life. I mean, I think it really allowed me to, yeah, to not think about it like that, and value and realize that there's so many other ways of finding companionship in life, and feeling good, like I actually don't miss having a partner. Yeah,
really.
I don't. Yeah.
Do you feel like sometimes like when people break up and stuff after the whole like I guess with the divorce the process is elongated. But I've never been in a relationship
Yeah.
saying it now, but like they say that like there's this stage of regret and like you want it to go back to the way it was. Then there's a phase of acceptance, and then it's almost like a death, right?
I mean, it is a grief.
It's a
It is a
grief.
grieving process.
Yeah,
I think it is a loss.
yeah,
Like, definitely.
yeah. Sorry, death is the
Yeah.
wrong word.
Yeah, but
Uh,
no, but
yeah.
yeah,
You
death-like.
get what I'm trying to
Yeah, yeah,
get at,
yeah,
like the whole
yeah,
process, right?
yeah,
But then there's also this part of you being free and lighter after all you go through the whole grief process. You
yeah.
accepted it, and you just feel lighter, and you feel like this weight has been taken off your shoulders.
Mm.
Did you feel this way, and when did you start feeling this way?
I think it took me a while. I think maybe at least 3 years from the separation, maybe four. I don't know. I mean, I think it just took me that much time to begin to feel, to take space in my own life and be like, yeah, I like this life, I like how it is now too. And not to say that I did not enjoy the partnership. There were many parts of the marriage that I really enjoyed also, right? Like, um, but I think I also enjoy this, and I don't feel, yeah, like I was saying, I don't, at least right now, I don't feel the longing for a partner. Yeah.
It's really interesting is how like and like in terms of like kids and stuff, do you want kids of your own or do you
Good question. The short answer is
drum
no.
roll? Oh.
No, but I've thought about it a lot. I always wanted to adopt, actually. But now it just feels maybe not the right time anymore. Yeah.
I feel like adoption's really hard
Yeah.
because you have to go through like foster care and stuff, and then
Yeah.
if the foster doesn't work out and you've been cherishing this kid for 2 years, right? Then you lose it and you lose that relationship, and you can't. It's not like losing a friend where you're like, oh, I have to move out, but let's stay in touch and grab each
I
other's number.
know.
It's like
Yeah.
you will
Yeah.
probably never see that person again, right?
Yeah.
And I feel
Yeah.
like adoption's really hard. Like people are like, oh, I want to be a good person, I want to adopt, right? Like even I've been there. Like I
Mm.
haven't said to anyone, but because I'm like when I was 10, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
it'd be cool to adopt instead of having your own children. Like why bring in more people
Mm.
and feed to that overpopulation when you can just take a kid that's already there?
Yeah.
But like it's so much like
Yeah.
it's so much more than that. Like you see it in like the movies and stuff. Like they
Mm.
had to go through the whole foster training, and then once you go through the foster training, you get a kid, and there's no guarantee if that kid will stay with you. So
Yeah.
you can't get too connected, but you have to be connected enough to show that you love the kid, right? I mean, I feel like adoption is like really, really hard.
I mean, the processes are different in
Different gun.
different countries. Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
am.
it's
I am no professional about like
yeah,
speaking about
yeah,
this. I'm.
yeah,
I'm talking based on what I saw in some Mark Wahlberg movie.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But if people are when I was thinking about it a lot, I would I still listen to that podcast because I really like it. There's this one really nice podcast on adoption in India, mainly, which is called Dear Pari. And it basically, they talk to parents who are adopting, children who have been adopted, adult children's experience of what it was like to have been adopted and have adoptive parents, etc., etc. It's a very, very diverse podcast that has been running for years and has a lot of information on the adoption processes in India, and I really like it. Like, I just like listening to it. It's a very pleasant podcast to hear. It's quite well done and stuff. But people are interested in listening, they can. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think adoption is really hard.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
but that's just me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe in some countries it's much easier, right?
yeah.
But I feel like you've been through so much. Like the whole like Rohingya refugees, the divorce, right? But I think one thing that's been hard for all of us, our audience, me, you, is COVID. COVID, we
Yeah.
love COVID, right? Hey, hey, hey. But like, how was the COVID experience like for you?
I think work wise, it was quite intense. Because I keep saying this, it was one of the, everyone stopped working around me, but I continued working because it was one of the easiest things to move to online. Was, you could just move it to video calls, and everyone was experiencing so much distress that it also seemed necessary to continue doing the therapy work, right? Like, and it was, I think, the 2 years of most very intense work that I've done, and it did feel like you're responding to any global crisis, but no one's acknowledging that you're in a global crisis situation, or like a humanitarian crisis, um, yeah. So I think it was, work wise, it was hard, but personally, like, I mean, there was all the fear of the disease and wondering about that, like how it would affect people, and worrying about family members or friends. All that was there, but I found the quietness, the less activity, the reduced socialization,
Mm-hmm.
um, the empty streets, in some ways, very soothing.
Very crazy.
Yeah,
It's crazy. You look out at like 5 p.m. rush hour, just
yeah,
you could
it's
actually
quiet.
see the road. It's
I know.
crazy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, I think I realized in some ways that the intensity of life, normal life, is also something that I feel is very intense, and I like the quiet. And so what it has helped me to do is actually to figure that out in my life now. On the other side of, I mean, we are not completely on the other side of COVID, even though we are all acting like it, but
really
I mean, in the sense that it still exists, right? There are still other
cases.
variants,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
people are still getting sick and all that.
But I
Yeah,
think this is the right way to go about it.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
another
yeah,
cold, right?
yeah,
The flu, you get a vaccine once a year.
yeah, yeah. But I wish that we would have taken some of the lessons a bit more into our life on the other side. Like, um, of making things more, of being a bit slower in our life, and both in terms of our relationship to the planet, but also in terms of it being more accessible to so many people if we take things a bit slower. I'm
What do
not saying that we
you
should, huh?
What do you mean by slower?
Meaning, like,
Not
not
faster.
having, huh?
Not faster.
Yeah, but like not having the big capitalist expectations of productivity of our lives and of everyone else's lives, right? Like, and obviously it was you had to have a certain privilege during COVID to experience it as soothing also. For some people, it was a lot of distress because it meant not having resources, not having money, or having to endure COVID and still get to work and still do your everyday thing like you were doing before, during lockdown, after lockdown, whatever, right? Like, so there is those things, the injustices that happened even during COVID, and I'm aware that to say that it was soothing is also a privilege,
Yeah.
but I think there could have been some lessons that we could have taken ahead that I think we have not, and we have just gone back to the pace of life before.
We
um
haven't really like
yeah,
almost I brushed past it. Like, oh, it's like a speck on like history. It's not.
yeah,
I really do feel like when people look back at it, this will be like a historical event.
yeah, it
I think we
was.
just haven't realized it. And
Yeah,
what we've learned about history is when we look back at it, we learn from it, and then we can apply it in the modern day use.
yeah,
My opinion is, like you're saying, like exactly like you're saying, is why let it become history when you can like learn from it now and fix it and go ahead without
yeah.
worrying that it might happen again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like just take it slow, take it easy. Like it's not.
Yeah,
There are certain things more important than working a 9 to 5 and making money. Like that.
yeah, yeah,
I think COVID has helped us realize it. But then as soon as, like you said, as soon as it's out, it's like, oh, back to the, like I've heard it so many times, like, oh, back to the 9 to 5 grind. It's
yeah,
like we've just been in a pandemic and learned like there's so much more that life has to offer.
yeah,
Yet you're still back on the 9 to 5 job to make your $100,000 a month, and like so you can like pay for your house and with a swimming pool, right? I mean, not saying there's anything wrong with that, right? But what
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying is
yeah,
there's almost a bit more to life than a 9 to 5 with a paycheck at the end of the month.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
yeah, and I think COVID definitely helped us realize that. And
yeah,
what I'm not saying is stop working and stop making money. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
money is a part of life. That's
yeah,
a key part of life. It's not
yeah.
life.
Exactly. Yeah. And the whole interconnectedness also that we have forgotten, right? Like it was so hard to ignore that we are all interconnected, right? Like all of us, and that all of us need to help each other in order to be able to survive when there is a crisis, right? Like, and I wish that mutual support system thing that was initiated. I mean, there were a lot of initiatives that did that. I wish we could have found ways to sustain that also. Yeah. Okay. Mm. And hoard less for myself and share more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And
Yeah.
but like going back to the whole therapy thing during COVID, I think like
Mm.
there's a lot with therapy. It's a bit different because you want that human interaction because you
Yeah.
can learn. Like you said, you're not very good at face reading, but there is something with body language and facial reading that you cannot get over a screen, right?
Mm.
Did
Mm.
you see any effects or drawbacks or
Mm.
progress with your clients? Like
Mm.
did you did
Mm.
you see a hit in that?
I mean, actually, even before COVID, I used to do video calls
Con-
anyway,
okay.
because I used to work with people in India while I lived in Kathmandu, and so I was doing some video calls anyway. And therapists have actually been doing video conferencing mental health therapy for a long time, because there's never been, I mean, there's always been not enough mental health therapists wherever. So I think people have always reached out to people who are not in, who are at a distance, whatever. So that has happened. So I used to do that before too. I think what I found difficult was the being on screen like 8 hours a day, which
Yeah,
I was not at all used to. Like
that was bad. That was
yeah,
really bad. I hated it.
yeah, my computer would get heated up, and I would keep telling people I have never used my computer so much. I'm a
Uh,
therapist, I'm not supposed to be on my computer like 8
24.
hours a
Yeah,
day. Yeah,
it's
or 10 hours a day, actually.
like
Yeah,
it was really bad in terms of
yeah,
and in terms of the whole with my experience. My grades slipped. Like I couldn't be bothered to study. Like I'm like,
mm, mm.
cause in school you're like, oh, my teachers will actually check. They'll care. They'll come up to me, right? But
Yeah,
now you get to hide it behind the screen, and even the teachers don't even care that
yeah,
much,
yeah,
and they're like, oh well, it's
yeah,
online. Like who cares? Like if I don't mark your work, you're not gonna come up to me and ask me for a mark or improvement, right? Like nobody was that bothered. Like there were a few that were,
yeah,
but
yeah,
across the global scale, I doubt anybody was as motivated to learn as they were in school, right?
yeah, yeah,
Keyworded motivation. There might have been some people that had just pushed through it and did the
yeah,
same, but they did push. They pushed through it. It was a lack of motivation. Like they weren't be like, oh yeah, I can't wait to get top marks. I'm gonna really try.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, like, oh, I just had to do this because I have to do this, right?
yeah,
I think a lot of people, especially teenagers, students, teachers, everybody, doctors, like literally anybody, a lot of people suffered from mental health, like during
yeah, yeah. No,
that.
for sure. Yeah,
Like, did you see an increase in the amount of clients you worked with, or?
yeah. Definitely an increase in the requests. Yeah, yeah. And I was working a lot more at that time. Yeah. I think everyone was feeling, I mean, other therapists I know were also feeling an increase in people reaching out for support. Yeah, definitely. I worked with people, I remember, in the first few weeks of lockdown who had COVID, and that was pretty scary, right? Like, as soon as, I mean, now it's different how you experience it if you have COVID, but in the first lockdown,
You
if
think
you
you,
got
yeah,
COVID, then it was pretty scary. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I mean, yeah, getting COVID as soon as it started, I think you had this realization of, oh, I might die. Like it was
Yeah,
that bad.
it
Like
was. Yeah,
it was
yeah,
pretty terrifying.
it was.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
yeah, but like you said, sitting at home all day, staring 10 hours at a screen. Did your mental health get affected? Like anything that you were like, oh my god, because they were definitely for me where I'm like, are we living in some sort of dystopian movie or dystopian book? Like this.
yeah,
This can't be my life right now. Like I'm supposed to be a kid playing
yeah,
football, studying with my friend.
yeah, yeah,
This is not supposed to be how anyone's supposed to be.
yeah,
Don't
yeah.
get me wrong. The first 2 months were like heaven. Like it was like holiday.
Like a break.
Like
Yeah,
a break. It was amazing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then you're just
yeah,
stuck in some prison,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, I think it depending on how old we are. I think the experience was really different, right? Like I was working at a school then, so I was talking to kids, and I really felt that that they were experiencing it as much longer than I was, like, because it's so, because because when you're younger, 2 years is a long time. When you're older, 2 years can be
Yeah, yeah,
lesser, right?
yeah.
Like it's just
hundred
proportion.
percent.
Yeah.
Like
So
COVID started when I was 2019, 4 years ago. When I was 11,
mm,
12.
yeah,
When I was 12, it started.
yeah,
13, 14. Yeah,
yeah,
13, 14, right?
yeah,
12 to 13 to 14.
yeah,
14, in the 3 years of my 14-year life was COVID. Like
yeah,
at the end, right? Like
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
lot of my life.
exactly. Yeah. So I think that makes a difference. I mean, there were moments when I was feeling like this is kind of the end of the world, kinds.
Really?
I did have, I mean, in the sense, there was that air around the first lockdown of COVID, right? Like it felt like,
This is our new life. We better get used to it.
yeah, kind of like that. No, I mean, it was feeling like that. but I don't think I felt any, like, a really, like, mental health distress particularly. I was tired, like, because I was working a lot, and I was mad at all the injustices and people not having access to services and governments not, like, prioritizing public health and all that, right? Like, but yeah, I mean, I think it was okay for me, meaning my own relationship with myself was okay. I did a lot of gardening, which helped.
It helped.
Yeah,
I mean, COVID, yeah.
yeah,
COVID, the whole, like,
yeah,
thing. The whole.
yeah.
Okay, I think we've been here for a while. So I'm just going to ask you a few, wrap up questions to
Mm-hmm.
really bring it all together, I guess.
Sure.
So, what is some advice you would like to share with young people who want to pursue a career in the mental health space? We kind of already touched on this, but
Yeah. I think the first thing I would say is really research well what you're going to study, um, and also think that a lot of the university education can be quite theoretical, and there's always a need for, like, supplementing that with practice and working with professionals who are already practicing, and you learn by doing mainly. You learn less in a classroom about how to be a therapist, I think. So choose the courses well. I think that would be my advice, and talk to people who are already doing that. Yeah, who are already being therapists. That helps. Mm.
what advice would you give to somebody struggling with mental health issues?
I would say, I mean, the most important thing is tell someone exactly how you're feeling. And if you tell one person and that person doesn't understand, tell another person. I mean, I would say tell someone till someone understands. There are people who understand. Sometimes it's just not the first or the second person we speak to. So keep telling till someone understands. And if you feel like, reach out to someone who is supposed to understand, like a therapist or a counselor. Yeah. Mm.
How do you see like technology changing the way you work? Like VR, AI.
Mm. I mean, someone was asking me recently, like ChatGPT will start doing therapy, so are you feeling threatened? And I was like, there is so much need for someone to have a conversation about mental health with, that I am not at all. I don't think that AI is going to take over and there's going to be, like, no work for therapists. And even if that happened, it would be okay. I mean, I think that we should reach out and ask questions and ask for help, whatever format is interesting for us to do. If we want in person, we should reach out in person. If we want video calls, we should do that. If we want to ask an AI program, we should do that. And we should figure out ways to, yeah, to have conversations about it and to talk about it and to try to feel better. That's more important to me than I don't know how it's going to change, really. It's hard to tell.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation. It was awesome. I learned a lot. My brain's expanded spiritually and just in all other ways. So, thank you so much, and I
Thank
really
you,
appreciate
man.
it.
Such an honor. Yeah, and thank you for having me. It
Yeah,
was lovely talking to you.
and thank you for listening. Most importantly.